Hi, I'm Cher, the Shadow Walker, and I'm taking a look at strange and weird occurrences and animal mutilations, along with spirit activity in residential homes, hauntings, etc. And I'm taking a look at central Canada and the northeast region of the United States, the upper northeast region. And I'm going to start with Quebec. So, in the Gatineau region of Quebec, in the last 48 hours, on March 31st, at 11:20 p.m., a mother and her adult son. The son heard his mother calling his name clearly from the kitchen. Upon entering the room was empty. His mother was actually upstairs in bed. As they both discussed the event, a heavy cast iron pan was physically slid 6 inches across the counter by an unforeseen force. Along with the spot where this occurred, the cast iron pot going across, was 12 Celsius, while the rest of the house was 21 Celsius. In Sepchutes, in a rural home in Part de Sepchutes in Quebec, at 3 a.m., the witching hour, long-term resident and homeowner saw a dense blacker than black, humanoid figure, approximately 7 feet, was seen standing in the bedroom doorway. It lacked facial features but projected an intense pressure of soul reading sensation. All the digital clocks in the home were reset to 12 simultaneously during this sighting. The witness reported the sound of shattering glass in the hallway, though no broken glass was found upon inspection. They reported it to the private paranormal log and shared it with the regional dog man log. In an apartment complex in Point St. Charles, Montreal, on March 31st at 1:15 a.m. in the morning, three roommates. A female entity was seen in a historical dark clothing resembling a black sister or nun. It was seen gliding through the living room area towards the balcony. A strong scent of incense and old parchment filled the room immediately following the sighting. The roommates reported hearing the sound of rosary dragging on hardwood for 20 minutes after the figure vanished, and they reported it to the Haunted Montreal Investigative Blog and local historical society. And a demonic case. Single family dwelling in Sherbrooke, Quebec. On April 1st, 2026, three family members suspected demonic or local vibrational attachment. The father reported three distinctive scratch marks appearing on his forearm while sleeping. Distorted guttural growling heard coming from beneath the floorboards. The family dog refused to enter the nursery, the growling at the empty corner of the room. And the local clergy and specialized dark entity clearing team was notified. And I've had those type of incidents. I've actually been scratched by it and cleared demonics. So these things do happen. Now I'm moving to Ontario in the last 48 hours. And in the Sudbury North Bay corridor, March 31st at 10 p.m. to 11:30 p.m., dozens of reports filled via digital tracker and social media. Witnesses reported shimmering diamond-shaped craft that transitioned into multicolored orbs. These objects appeared to hover over the mining outskirts of Sudbury before performing rapid, non-linear maneuvers. This sighting coincides with the major geometric storm. So they're not sure whether that was the cause of it. It was reported to the Canadian UFO Survey and the regional flight centers. In animal mutilations in Norwich Township, Oxford County, and the Niagara Peninsula at 6:30 a.m. on April 1st, two independent livestock owners and a local veterinarian consult witnessed precise cookie cutter extraction of the ear and tongue Despite the depth of the surgical grade, no blood was present on the animal's carcass or the surrounding grass. That's a cow. The tissue's edges were glazed and appeared carbonized, consistent with immediate high heat sealing. One farmer reported that his cattle were huddled in the opposite corner of the field, refusing to graze near the site where the carcass was found. And they reported it to the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture and the OPP. And on the First Nations sighting and spiritual sacrifice in the Oneida Nation, the Thames First Nation, Southwood, Ontario, in late March, while investigation is ongoing into regard to a mutilated eagle, community members have reported unusual lights over the sacred ground in the last 48 hours leading up to the discovery. For the Oneida people, these events are viewed as a violation of sacred relationship with the creation, and some elders link the lights to ancient star people transition during the spring magnetic shifts. I have actually heard of that before. They reported it to the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment. So, in poltergeist activity in Sudbury, Ontario, near Minnow Lake area, at 3:15 a.m. on April 1st, a couple and their teenage daughter. All the upper kitchen cabinets were found standing wide open simultaneously after a loud concussional bang awoke the house. A heavy dining chair was found overturned in the center of the room, though no entry was made to the home. So nobody else was in there but them. And they were sleeping at the time and it woke them. The family member's smart home hub repeatedly broadcast low-frequency hum that was not part of its standard audio library, and they reported it to the local paranormal forum there in the North Ontario Fright Space. And in Ontario, in London, Ontario, in the Old East Village area, March 31st at 10:45 p.m., two local residents. One resident clearly heard their partner's voice calling for help from the basement. Upon rushing down, they found the basement was empty. Their partner was actually in the backyard at the time. What they did hear was heavy boot footsteps that were heard ascending the wooden staircase immediately after the vocalization stopped abruptly at the top of the landing where no one was standing. It was documented by an independent investigator, and they've been having ongoing trouble, these people. In the suburb residents of Brampton, Ontario, at 1 a.m. on April 1st, and this was a single occupant to a home, a tall hooded shadow figure was observed standing at the foot of the bed. Unlike the standard apparition, it was described as absorbing all the light in the room. I have actually, for years, seen one, and I did a piece on it that I have there on my YouTube channel. The witness reported a feeling of intense crushing pressure on their chest and the inability to move, sleep paralysis, or the old hag syndrome, until they managed to turn on the lamp. A lingering scent of stagnant water and sulfur remained in the room for several hours after the entity vanished, and they reported it to the Southern Ontario Paranormal Society. And in a historic residential conversion in Kingston, Ontario, at 4 a.m. on April 1st, and this went on from midnight till 4 a.m. in the morning, three tenants in this apartment, they reported sounds of a frantic scratching coming from inside a locked storage closet. Upon opening it, the contents had been rearranged into a circular pattern on the floor. A childlike figure was seen in the reflection of the hallway mirror, but was not visible when looking directly into the hall. And they reported it to the building security and to the Kingston Ghost and Spirit Tracking Log. We're going to take a look at Michigan State in the last 48 hours, and they've had a spike along the upper area of the Lake Superior region. in Port Austin, and the Cascade, the Thumb in Michigan. That's how it's stated. On March 31st at 10:15 p.m., 8 confirmed witnesses, including a local fisherman and a resident, visual large triangular craft with 3 faint white lights at a corner, pulsing red in the center. The craft was described as shimmering the surface of Lake Huron before silently rising and disappearing into the clouds at an extreme speed. And they reported it to the National UFO Center and to the Coast Guard. In animal mutilations in Bad Axe, Michigan, at 7 a.m. on April 1st, one livestock owner and a neighboring farmhand, they found a yearling heifer in a remote section of pasture, surgical removal of left eye and tongue in a perfect 4-inch circular patch of skin removed from its hip. The edge of the wound were hard and appeared to be lasered. There was no jagged edges and no sign of a struggle, no footprints, no blood, no predatorial tracks on the ground, and they reported it to the Huron County Sheriff's Office. And on March 31st at 6 p.m. and April 1st at 5 p.m., a Shadow Man residence in a private home in Jackson, Michigan, and a Shadow Man in Jackson, Michigan, and this occurred between April 1st at 12:15 a.m. So 2 local residents, this is in a private home, saw a tall, thin shadow entity was seen standing in the corner of the nursery. When the lights were flickered on, the entity did not vanish immediately but seemed to dissolve into the floor. A physical dresser was found tilted forward at a 45-degree angle, being supported by nothing, and they reported to the Michigan Paranormal Alliance. I'd like to see the property cleared first, but yes, this is a problem. An echo in the room, and it's a poltergeist incident. In a historical Victorian home in Marguerite, Michigan, the Upper Peninsula area, on March 31st at 9 p.m. till midnight, 4 individuals, that was an investigating team, and the homeowner, distant rhythmic humming coming from the attic despite it being empty. Multiple kitchen chairs were stacked in a pyramid at the top of the dining table while the witnesses were in the adjacent room. A sudden drop of 4 Celsius was recorded in the hallway during the drumming, and they reported it to the Upper Peninsula Paranormal Researchers. And a demonic incident in a residential apartment in Detroit, Michigan, in the Cass Corridor. At 3 a.m. on April 1st, a resident and a visitor, both witnesses heard a sound of a resident's deceased grandmother calling from the stairwell. The voice quickly transitioned from a familiar tone to a deep, guttural, distorted snarl that vibrated the walls. Large, oily handprints were found on the walls at a height of nearly 8 feet. Local clergy was called for a blessing. I hate to break this to you, but the property needs to be cleared first, the outside, and if the building is brick, which it likely is, it's going to be very hard to clear this, and clergy just doesn't cut it. That's just in my experience, and I have done this before. They didn't hear it. They saw shadow units, and they reported it to the local paranormal. In New York State, over the last 24 hours, in the Albany Pine Hills neighborhood at 11:50 on March 31st, 2 residents, they were homeowners, saw a translucent, tall male in a period clothes that were the 1940s, and she saw it reflected in the mirror. And when the witness turned to look in the hallway, the figure was gone, but the mirror remained fogged. And a clear, disembodied whisper saying, "Not yet," was heard by both witnesses simultaneously. and a stack of mail on the entryway table was scattered across the floor despite no windows open or doors being open. And they reported it to the Capital District Paranormal Society. And a poltergeist in a Victorian home in Ninjak, New York, near the Hudson River. I don't think I pronounced that right. On April 1st at 3 a.m., 3 family members reported the sound of heavy furniture dragging across the attic floor. Upon inspection, several storage trunks had been moved from the center of the room to the corners. Faint shimmering orb was captured on a nursery monitor, moving in a rhythmic pattern around the crib. A sudden, overwhelming scent of wet earth and ozone filled the upstairs hallway for approximately 10 minutes. And they reported it to the local community's Ghostbuster Law. Don't know who they are. And Fingers Lake, potential demonic. In Chattanooga, New York, on March 31st at 9 p.m. till midnight, a mother and her daughter, the daughter claiming to be talking to the other father in the basement. The father was actually at work 30 miles away. A deep scratching sound was heard coming from the inside walls, transitioning into a distorted humming that caused the family dog to hide under the bed. 3 parcel claw-like scratches were found on the interior of the basement door the following morning, and they reported it to a private spiritual consult and clergy. If I was them, I would get a shaman to clear the property first. It's the property first. For these type of incidents, you have to do the property. And Sleepy Hollow area. A resident in a complex near Old Dutch Church, Sleepy Hollow, New York, on April 1st at 2:15 a.m., night shift security guard and 1 resident, what they saw was a shadow walker entity, a dense black, thin, blacker than black silhouette was seen moving through a solid brick wall in the parking garage and into the residential storage unit. So the security cameras experienced frequency whiteouts for exactly 12 seconds while the entity was visible to the naked eye. The temperature dropped 15 Fahrenheit and was recorded in the immediate vicinity of the sighting. So exactly where they seen it, that temperature went boom down. And they reported it to the building management and to the Hudson Valley Paranormal Tracking Log. And in Pennsylvania state, in the Susquehanna River area near Harrisburg in New York, at March 31st, 9:22 p.m., 40 plus independent reports with AMS and local sky watchers. What they saw was a metallic looking craft that was seen descending towards the river silently before emitting a localized blue pulse. Unlike the meteor reports elsewhere, this object leveled off and moved horizontally at high speed towards the Blue Mountains. National Weather Services is who they reported it to, and to the American Meteorology Society. In animal mutilations in rural Lancaster County, a farm near Hand in Bird, not sure where that is, on April 1st at 6:45 a.m., 2 farm owners and a local farrier, 2 prize dairy cows found deceased in a remote paddock. Wow. The perfect 2-inch diameter holes drilled into the skull and jaw. 0 blood present on the white hides of the cows or the surrounding straw beds. Bone and tissue around the entry points were carbonized, turned to black ash, indicating a thermal event that instantly sealed the wound. And they reported to the Pennsylvania State Police and to the local agriculture investigators. That's a shame. And on March 31st at 6 p.m. through April 1st at 5 p.m. in the West Pittston Echo poltergeist residual. In West Pittston, Pennsylvania, At 2 a.m. on April 1st, three family members, all kitchen chairs were found stacked in a tower reaching the ceiling, and there was a deep, rhythmic, auditory thumping in the walls, and they reported that to the local paranormal society. So, in the Chestnut Ridge area in Westmoreland and Fayette counties, on March 31st at 10:40 p.m., five independent witnesses, including a local volunteer firefighter, what they saw was a dull, metallic chevron-shaped craft moving silently over the treetop levels. Witnesses reported that the craft passed overhead, vehicles' engines sputtered, and cell phone screens experienced static band. They reported it to the Pennsylvania MUFON, and they also reported it to the UFO and Bigfoot Research Hotline. Animal mutilations in a rural farm in Cluttston, Berks County, and the Squahana River Valley area at 6:15 a.m. on April 1st. Two livestock owners and one responding large animal veterinarian. Two sheep were found with their entire left sides of their face cored out down to the bone. The edges of the skin were smooth and slightly charred, indicating high heat cauterization. Despite the severity of the trauma, no blood was found on the animals, wool, or surrounding soil. What a shame. The veterinarian noted that the internal organs appeared shrunken, as if dehydrated or subjected to microwave-like radiation. No predator tracks or human footprints were found in the muddy fields surrounding the carcass, and they reported it to the Pennsylvania State Police and to the Berks County Agriculture Extension. And in Clarksburg, Pennsylvania, good heavens, on March 31st to April 1st, residents near a historic 1965 crash site reported a low-frequency vibration that rattled windows and caused their pets to exhibit extreme anxiety, and they reported it to the local paranormal society. And now we're going to move to Vermont. And in Vermont, in the Green Mountains National Forest, March 31st at 10 p.m., five individuals, they were campers and a local forest ranger. They saw a series of brilliant white tic-tac-shaped objects moving in a staggering formation. Witnesses noted the objects made a 90-degree turn at a height of speed without slowing down. The sighting lasted approximately 4 minutes before the objects were shot upward and vanished, and they reported it to the National UFO Center and the Vermont Skywatch digital log. And a dairy farmer in Enzoberg Falls, Vermont, on April 1st at 6:15 p.m., and it's two farm owners and a local large animal vet. They had a prize Jersey cow found deceased with the left ear and udder removed with laser precision likeness. No blood was found, and there was no tracks in the mud around the carcass. And they reported it to, and the dog that was there wouldn't go near. And they reported it to the Vermont State Police and the Agency of Agriculture, Food, and Markets. And on March 31st to April 1st, so this is from 6 p.m. to 5 p.m., there was a haunting in Chester. It's a renovation of a historic home in Chester, Vermont, and it peaked in activity on April 1st at 3:10 a.m. Four family members. During the renovation, all newly installed cabinet doors began rhythmically slamming in unison for nearly 2 minutes. The youngest daughter reported seeing shimmering fairies in her room, which investigators believe are residual imprints linked to Civil War era history on the property, and it very could be. Disembodied children's laughter heard echoing from the basement stairs. It's the property again that needs to be cleared. A shaman needs to come in. This one you could bring a priest in for as well, or a clergy member. I'd go with a clergy member. And but they really have to know what they're doing. If they don't understand the ground and they don't understand the rocks, they're not doing it right. and they reported it to the regional paranormal investigating team. And something like that will get worse. In the Bennington Triangle, residential shadows. In a private home in the outskirts of Bennington, Vermont, on March 31st at 11:15 p.m., two adult residents. They saw a shadow walker was observed standing in the hallway. It was described as a 6-foot tall silhouette that appeared two-dimensional and darker than the surrounding darkness. A heavy hallway mirror was found shattered on the floor the next morning, but the wire was still hanging intact on the wall, so the whole exterior case, just the mirror, was gone. Electronic devices, both cell phones and battery charges, went from 80% to zero within seconds, and they reported it to the Green Mountain Paranormal Archives. So they've got some shifting between plates there when they're getting entities through. Somebody could be really depressed in that home, or somebody could be really sick, somebody that they know is, and that's putting that depression in the home that's creating those shadows. And in a rental property in Brattleboro, Vermont, at 2 a.m. on April 1st, one occupant and the occupant heard their roommate calling for help from the attic. The roommate was actually out of town for the weekend. The voice quickly deepened into a guttural, multi-toned growl that seemed to come from everywhere in the house at once. Well, they need the property cleared first. The resident's cat was found in a state of catatonic shock under the sofa and required veterinarian attention. Well, that's pretty serious. And they reported it to the local clergy. And in New Hampshire, on March 30th to April 1st, what we have going on in the extraterrestrial area is near Lincoln and Salem Windham area, near the White Mountains National Forest, at 11:15 p.m. on March 31st through till April 1st at 4 a.m. 5 independent witnesses, including a local hiker and 2 residents, they saw silent orbs descending as pulsing white and amber were bobbing over the forest lines. The second orb appeared and began synchronized dancing with the first before both shot upward at a 90-degree angle. So there was some portals. Those are portals. A lot of times Bigfoot will come through in those, or a dog man will come through in those. One witness in Salem reported hearing what sounded like a large group of people chattering in languages that resembled English, but was inaudible, described as distorted or reversed speech. Sometimes what I tell people is we're on a different energy plane than spirits, than other things. And sometimes when there's a convergence of energy planes like this, you will actually hear, sometimes even witnesses will see people in period close, or you'll just hear a conversation of a bunch of people walking by and footprints, and that can happen anywhere. I had it happen in Nova Scotia, and I was in the middle of nowhere, and that's where I seen the Bigfoot, but I did have that. Being a psychic, I have lots of things like that come through, and so these things can occur. And during the sighting, local coyotes and owls became uncharacteristically loud and frantic. And before there was a dead break in silence, and they reported to the National UFO Center and to a local group that was there that dealt with this type of stuff. And in an animal mutilation in New Hampshire, on April 1st at 6:45 a.m., a local farmer and a local veterinarian precise oval-shaped incisions on the jaw and ear of a mature cow. The animal was completely drained of blood, but no blood was found on the snow or hide. The wound's edges were dry, smooth, and appeared seared by a thermal source, and they reported it to the New Hampshire Department of Agriculture and to the Coos County Sheriff's Department. And poltergeist activity in Exeter in New Hampshire. It's a historic colonial residence between April 1st, between 2 a.m. and 3:30 a.m. A family member of 3 Okay, so here's what happened. The family was awakened by the sound of heavy stones being dropped in the upstairs hallway. No objects were found in the hallway, but a heavy antique mirror was discovered laying face flat on the floor without breaking. The daughter reported a shadowy man with no face standing in her closet. The entity left behind a localized cold spot of 8 Celsius. And also, their home security system malfunctioned and it triggered motion detection alerts in the living room every 10 minutes for an hour, though the video played back showed only static like distortions, and they reported it to the New Hampshire Paranormal Investigating Group. And in the Hamptons, Hampton, New Hampshire, March 31st at 10:30 p.m., two occupants of a home, one resident reported hearing the front door open and their spouse's voice saying, "I'm home," from the mudroom. The spouse was actually in the living room the entire time. A set of keys hanging by the door was seen swinging violently as if swiped by a passing hand, and they reported to the local community watch and to the um, independent researchers log. And then in spiritual activity, and we're going to Chester, Vermont now. And this occurred on March 31st at 11 p.m. A family of four. The heavy lid of a built-in wood box was seen lifting and slamming repeatedly by all four family members. The sound of children's laughter was heard coming from an empty attic immediately following this physical disturbance. The youngest daughter reported seeing fairies, small bright lights, orbs hovering near the hearth. They reported to the local historian society and to a private paranormal researchers team. And there's a mirror mimics incident. In Bennington, Vermont, near the Bennington Triangle, at 3:15 on April 1st, and that's in the AM, two residents, one resident heard their partner's voice calling, "Come here," from the master bathroom. The partner was actually downstairs in the kitchen. Upon entering the bathroom, the resident saw a reflection in the mirror of a figure standing behind them, but no one was physically there. All battery-operated devices in the room, phones and flashlights, drained to zero within seconds of the sighting. And they shared it with the Bennington Triangle Monitoring Group. Cool. And in St. Albans, Vermont, on March 31st at 1 a.m., an occupant and a neighbor viewing from outside, so the occupant was in the house. The neighbor reported seeing a massive hunched shadow pacing past the upstairs window of the occupant's home. The occupant was asleep at the time, but woke up to the smell of rotting meat and ozone. Ooh. The occupant felt the heavy crushing weight on their chest and discovered 3 red welts on their shoulder the next morning. Yeah. The resident's cat refused to re-enter the house for 6 hours after the event, and they called the local clergy. Sorry, but you need to call Sherman and you need to have the property cleared. So a medicine person or a shaman would be best for that. And that's the property that needs to be handled. And an apartment conversation in Stowey, Vermont. And this occurred on on April 1st at 2:30 a.m. 3 tenants in different units heard a woman, and they seen her too. A woman in a white tattered dress was seen ascending the main staircase. She appeared semi-transparent and did not make a sound. Tenants reported the sound of sobbing echoing throughout the radiator pipes for nearly an hour. Multiple doorknobs on the second floor were heard rattling simultaneously as if someone were trying to enter the room. I've had that before where I had a ghost that actually opened doors. And they reported it to the building management and to the Green Mountain Paranormal Log. And in the New Hampshire area, in a private residence in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, at 3:15 a.m., 2 witnesses and their dog. One resident heard their spouse's voice calling for help from the basement while the other spouse was asleep beside them. The family dog refused to approach the basement door. standing in a defensive posture and growling at the empty hallway. A heavy latch on the basement door was found unbolted from the inside despite no one being in the lower level. And they reported to the local paranormal community and to the news radio that's in that area. And in Granite State, a poltergeist. An historic 19th century home in the New Hampshire area at 9 p.m. on March 31st. So it went from 9 p.m. till midnight. 3 members of the family, multiple dining chairs were found stacked in a precarious tower in the center of the kitchen while the family was in the living room. Rapid, heavy pounding sounds moved across the ceiling on the first floor, following the residents as they moved from room to room. Faint static-like humanoid silhouettes were seen in the home near the original fireplace, and they reported it to the New Hampshire Paranormal Investigating Group. And a resident in a home near White Mountain National Forest at 1 a.m., the occupant, a dense hooded figure approximately 7 feet tall, was seen standing at the corner of the master bedroom. It appeared to absorb the light from the nearby nightlight. And the witness felt an overwhelming sense of dread and nausea, feeling like being watched by something with hostile intent. And a strong smell of burnt rubber or sulfur manifested for 10 minutes following the entity's disappearance. And they reported it to the private spiritual clearing consult, so they reported it to the church. And multi-unit resident building in Manchester, New Hampshire, on March 31st at 11:30 p.m., 2 neighbors in a shared hallway. A woman in a dark, tattered dress was seen walking up the main staircase. She vanished instantly when one of the neighbors spoke to her. The sound of a dragging chain or heavy metal being pulled across the floorboards was heard for 20 minutes after the visual sighting, and a sudden drop of 10 Celsius was measured in the hallway, though the building's heating was active, and they reported to the building security and the Haunted New Hampshire digital log. And that is it for Central Ontario and Northeast regions of the United States, the upper part. Thank you so much for listening. I greatly appreciate it. Have a wonderful day.